All righty, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the Chamber's webinar today. My name is PJ Prunty. I am the President and CEO of the Greater Danbury Chamber of Commerce, and we are joined by our friends from the Network Support Company today, who will provide us some insight into how to make remote work effective, which is a very relevant topic these days. Before I introduce our panel, I would like to encourage those who might have a question to submit through the chat feature. The chat feature is located at the bottom of your screen, the Zoom screen there. And I'm not sure if Jim Kennedy is joining us today. I encourage him to submit some very challenging and tough questions to the panel to see how they handle it. So with that, I will introduce our panel for this afternoon. We have Bill Starbuck. Bill is the Senior Business Development Manager. Welcome, Bill. Thank you for joining us. We're also joined by Buddy Pitt. Buddy is the Director of Technical Development. Thanks, Buddy, for taking some time out. And leading off our conversation today is Amy Rollman. Amy is the Chief Marketing and Sales Officer at Network Support Company. So Amy, we'll have you kick things off here. And putting it simply, how has COVID-19 impacted remote work and business operations?
Thanks, PJ. So remote work and telecommuting have been around for quite a while, and their popularity, although varying from industry to industry, has increased slowly but steadily in recent years. Now, when the government declared a state of emergency with the coronavirus, many businesses of all sizes and across industries rapidly transitioned to a remote workforce. A lot of the small and mid-sized businesses that did so were not prepared for this. And given they really had a lot of dire issues on their mind at the time, everything from overall business survival to personal health concerns, that transition was really quite challenging. So prior to this, I'm sure many people thought about working from home, and they kind of thought of it as an ideal Shangri-La where you made your own schedule and you regained commuting time. But in reality, remote work has often looked more like this. And what's happened is that a lot of businesses kind of had to back into the solution that they're currently using. And as a result, they may have large numbers of employees who are feeling frustrated. They may be seeing depleted productivity overall, and they also may be leaving themselves open to a cyber attack. And it's truly critical that we get this right, because all indications are that remote work is part of the new normal. Whether it's full-time or part-time, large percentages of our workforce or some percentage of our workforce, it's here to stay. And these are just a few of the highly well-known and reputed business and media sources that speak to exactly that. So the question that's really ahead of all of us right now is, how do we make remote work as effective as possible? Studies to date indicate that the #1 challenge of remote workers is communication and collaboration. Now, communication and collaboration is relatively easy when you're sitting next to people and you can walk over to someone's desk or the office next door and ask them a quick question or casually run an idea by them. But it becomes a lot more challenging when we're all in completely separate locations. And this dynamic becomes even more pronounced when you have team members who need to work together, who may not be familiar with each other, and also new team members who have just joined the organization. And this is by no means just a minor social issue, because studies show that 86% of employees and executives alike cite the lack of communication, and collaboration is the #1 reason for business failures. So if you want your business initiatives to move forward, you need to proactively facilitate keeping your employees in touch with each other. Now, I also want to mention that tied with communication and collaboration as the #1 struggle is loneliness. Now, first and foremost, there's the human aspect of this, which is that we want to keep our employees happy and safe and protected. But there are also some larger professional implications. It's one thing if you've got a few people who are working remotely and they're feeling disconnected because the overall impact on the organization is somewhat limited. But in situations like this, where we've got large numbers of people working remotely and who are likely to continue to do so for an extended period of time, the business implications become much broader. And we all know that lonely and disengaged employees are really those employees who become less productive. We've all seen the studies that unengaged employees are your less productive employees. So these are some very real and very impactful challenges that we're facing. But the good part about it is that they are definitely surmountable. And technology can be a big help in doing so. The right technology set up in the right way can have you operating just as effectively or almost as effectively as if everyone was actually in the office together. And to set up technology to do so, it's really important to do two key things. The first is to ensure easy and secure network access. So your employees need to be able to quickly and easily access your systems and your data, and to do so in a way that doesn't put your business at risk to a cyber attack. And then secondly, it's all about exactly what we've been talking about, fostering communication and collaboration. Now, you may have looked at this and said, okay, I'm bought in, and the tendency may be to throw a bunch of tools at this issue. But this is one of those situations where more may actually not be better. And it's really about carefully choosing the right set of tools that integrate together in a way so that employees are clear on things like which tool they should be using for which type of communication.
Excellent. Thank you, Amy. Appreciate that. So let's take a closer look at one of your first points, Amy. Buddy, how do you set up a user-friendly remote access?
Sure. So setting up remote connectivity is all about balancing that ease of use of access with the privacy and security and regulatory concerns of the organization. So basically, you want your team to be able to access and get to the data and systems that they need, while also keeping them safe from cyber criminals and other threats. And to do this, there's not really a one-size-fits-all for all companies, depending on what business you're in, what your regulatory environment looks like. And if you're using a lot of on-premise type of systems, meaning you have servers in your office, versus having your applications hosted with as a software as a service provider or like a cloud type of a solution. So all those things will weigh in.
Excellent. Buddy, you mentioned cyber criminals. We hear a lot about increased cyber attacks around COVID-19 in our remote workforce. So what do we need to know about this?
Sure. So, I mean, anytime we have a news story that makes national headlines or world headlines like this, cyber criminals will use that, knowing that it has people's attention. So they're going to start to send phishing emails into organizations that are on this topic, just because they're more likely to click. So one of the most important things during a time like this is to get news and information from sources that you trust, and you should be initiating the connection to those news sources to get your information, and not really engaging with things that have landed in your inbox. So right here, what we have is an example of a phishing email. And what these are normally designed to do is to interact with people. So this one here is playing off of a news headline of Tom Hanks testing positive for COVID-19. And they've kind of put this into an email template that's designed to get people to click on it that are interested in that story, right? So it looks like it's coming from People Magazine, but if we look closely at this email, it's coming from, the from address says from People Magazine, but it's news@magazines-people.com, which is not the correct domain name. So there's a red flag right there that there's something wrong. Also in the image, if we hover our mouse over that image in the email without clicking on it, you'll see this little pop-up come up. And what that pop-up is showing is where the link actually goes to. which is not a People Magazine domain. This is actually an email from one of our training portals. So we can see that this link is actually going to a training portal. So what we want to be able to do is make sure that as these come in, we're not actually going and clicking on them. We're going to see many variations of emails like this. This is just an example of one that has come out. But as a general rule, if it lands in your inbox and you haven't requested that information or signed up to get that information, it's probably fake and maybe malintended to cause damage.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it seems to be all too often occurrence with the cyber criminal activity going on. So what would you say is the best way to secure a remote workforce?
Sure, yeah. So the biggest thing that we can do is to start with a plan and formulate a remote access strategy. And so some questions that we might want to ask ourselves going through this process, or if you're engaged with your IT department, we want to talk about who needs access. Are we moving to 100% remote workforce? Is 40% of your workforce need remote access? Because that's really going to inform the strategy and the solutions that we want to bring to the table as options that could provide that remote access. Next, we're going to look at the necessary performance standards. So this is where we're going to discuss your application environment to determine what the technical software license and demands are going to be. This is going to be driven a lot. It's going to be a different solution if you have your applications running on a server in a physical office, in your office, versus being in that cloud or software as a service provider where you can access the software from anywhere. So we're going to really look at that software environment and decide the performance standards and solutions. Then the capacity requirements. So we want to know what resources we need. You know, if you have servers in your office and all of a sudden you're going to have 100 people connecting to those servers and all you have is a cable modem, we may want to reconsider that and start to make adjustments to different things. So we want to look at the resource and capacity requirements to make sure our solution fits the need. Then we want to make sure that we understand the level of confidentiality. And what I'm really referring to with confidentiality is if you have regulatory oversight, like a HIPAA or a PCI or DFARS type compliance. We have to make sure that your remote access strategy is in line with your regulatory requirements so that you don't get points on your audit or have your certifications taken away from you. And then one of the things that gets overlooked a lot, and we have to be really, really careful, is we're sending people home to work and they're not used to accessing the systems in this way. So we want to make sure that we have a guide for first-time users. And this is the documentation or easy guides that we could give them to walk through. But also coupled with that, we want to make sure that there's a live support mechanism so that when they go to try things and something isn't working, there's ultimately going to be a problem somewhere. They have someone to call and they know how to contact that support person or support staff, whether that's internal IT or a managed service provider, to help them get set up and get it underway. Because that's just frustrating when when you're trying to get connected and stuff's not working. So that support line for them to call for help is extremely important.
So weighing all these issues, and sometimes it could feel sort of overwhelming when you're in your home office. What are some of the best practices that you would say to put in place to make sure that we stay secure?
Sure. So when we talk about these, I just want to point out that we're talking about cybersecurity best practices, understanding that not all of these are going to be met. But if we start with the best practices, then we could kind of formulate our solutions from there. So the number one thing is providing corporate-owned devices is always a really good idea. The reason that we like to do this is because if the company owns the device, we have a little bit more control over what goes on it. It's only used for corporate use. We can make sure that the operating system is at the latest version and the software running on it is all patched up to date. We can make sure that it has the right security tools, antivirus software, cloud security services, and that software is always running and it's up to date. We know the device isn't being used by other family members and there's a required authentication method to access it. We can ensure that the device is encrypted in case it gets stolen, and that our corporate data is not just sitting on anyone's home computers or iPads or whatever, that it's being stored on a corporate device. So that always is the best case scenario. If that's not possible, there are other solutions, but that's one of the things that we'd have to kind of adapt to each individual situation. Next is the use of VPN software. Using VPN software basically takes that device and connects it to the corporate network. So tying into point number one, we want to use the corporate device along with that VPN. So when we plug it in, we know the device is safe. If we're using VPN software on a user's home computer, that the kids and teenagers are using on, and it could be infected with malware and it's not being managed. Once we connect that VPN software, we're leaving an opportunity for malicious software to transition onto your corporate network. So we want to be careful about that. Next is, especially with cloud and software as a service type services, we want to require multi-factor authentication. We've all heard about these data breaches that happen with LinkedIn and Yahoo and Equifax. A lot of what's stolen in those data breaches is user credentials. So we have a username and password that authenticates us to a system. It's extremely vulnerable today. Microsoft's Office 365 deals with about 300 million failed login attempts a day. 99.9% of those are thwarted by the use of multi-factor authentication. So just to define what that is, it's saying that you need 2 out of 3 things to authenticate. And the 3 factors of authentication are something you know, which is your username and password. Normally, it's something you have, which in our case is your cell phone that we could either generate a one-time password on, or a text message, a SMS message could be sent to that phone showing that you have it in your possession to authenticate. So username and password, something you know, your phone, something you have. Then the third option is something you are, which is your biometric. If you're doing an iris scan or a fingerprint scan, that would be a third option for multi-factor authentication. Combined with this, we want to set up password policies that are effective. So in our password policies, we want to see really 3 major things get touched. We want to regulate the complexity of the password. So we might set things up that say, hey, your password has to be 12 characters long, and it has to have uppercase, lowercase, numbers, alphanumeric characters, and so on. We also want to set a duration that the password is good for. So the password expires every 60 days or 90 days, whatever you want to set that to. So passwords aren't good forever, basically. And then we want to set out a lockout policy so that if someone is guessing the wrong password over and over, that the account will eventually lock out and won't take any more attempts. So that could be a fairly high number, 20 attempts over a 4-hour period or something. That way people could put incorrect passwords in a few times and it's okay. But a brute force type of attack is going to be detected and lock the account down. And then the last thing that I have for best practices is to implement a security awareness training program. Going back to that phishing email that I showed before, what security awareness training is designed to do is have our users be able to identify those threats when they land in the inbox and not interact with them at all. So they're the biggest attack surface in any organization. Hackers out there are not trying to break through your firewall. They're not trying to decrypt your SSL traffic. That's all too much work. The biggest attack surface is sending phishing emails into organizations and trying to get a user to interact with them. So training them to be able to identify those threats stops the attack chain right there. It doesn't go any further. We don't have to rely on the antivirus software or the DNS filtering or anything else we might be doing to protect your network. If the user doesn't click on it, the threat is kind of over right there. So security awareness training is effective against most of the cyber attacks that we're seeing today. And if we identify that threat and don't take any action on it when it lands in the inbox, we're eliminating the risk right there.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate all that insight to the cybersecurity. We are recording this and we will be sending it out later. I'm getting a couple texts here on my cell phone. Folks are wanting to know if we are recording this. The answer to that is yes. Again, I encourage everyone to, if you have a question, please use it to the chat box there on the Zoom feature. We'll take the opportunity to field a couple questions towards the end of the presentation. So in addition to secure access, which obviously is very critical, one of the components that we discussed earlier, and Amy touched upon this, is effective communication and collaboration. Bill, can you explain on that a little bit more, please?
Yes, PJ. So to have effective communication and collaboration while working remotely, we need to replicate the office environment as closely as possible using technology. That means building an infrastructure in 4 key areas. Because you don't have the ability to share the same office, video meetings can be used to replace the face-to-face meetings. On-the-fly communication via instant messaging replaces the casual hallway or water cooler conversation. Project management software keeps your project teams going and collaborating as if they were right next to each other. And lastly, document management allows teams to share, create, access, and change documents together in real time. The first key infrastructure pillar, video meetings. Video meetings are critical to keeping employees connected because they allow you to see body language and facial expressions, which are key aspects of communication. You can use these services to have all types of meetings, one-on-ones with fellow colleagues, team meetings, company-wide meetings, or even meetings with clients and prospects. The top 3 video meeting services that we recommend are Zoom, Teams, and Google Meeting. Zoom and Teams tend to be more business focused, where Google Meet is more education and classroom focused. Most video meeting services have both a paid and a free version available. The free versions often have limitations such as duration of the meeting and a maximum number of meeting attendees. So for a small gathering, this might be, might be a perfect solution, but for larger meetings, it might not be adequate. Regardless of which solution you select, it's important to make sure that the meetings are secure. That means being sure not to post the meeting notice in a public forum. You perhaps might have heard about Zoom bombing in the news over the past. That's exactly how those credentials were captured. Lastly, don't forget to use these services to have fun. When you're working remotely, as Amy mentioned, people can get lonely. Many businesses are scheduling video coffee breaks, or even like a themed happy hour, such as wear a fun hat. So always have fun. The second pillar is on-the-fly communication via instant messaging. When you're in the office, there's a lot of informal communication. Someone may stop by your office to ask a quick question about a project, or to check the status of a client inquiry, or to clarify a point after a meeting. When you're remote, you don't have that luxury. So making instant messaging a key component to your remote workforce is very important. The top services we recommend are Teams, Slack, and perhaps a unified communications tool. Teams and Slack are software services where unified communication is a broader term, which would include software that you might get from your phone vendor, such as Cisco, Windstream, or Mitel. A fun fact about Microsoft Teams, as of March 18th, right before all this hit us, there were 44 million daily users of Teams. And certainly that number has gone up today. And many of our clients and friends and business colleagues may actually already have access to Teams. It is part of the Microsoft Office 365 suite. To make instant messaging even more effective, you can set up groups or channels of communication. So you can create a group for sales, loan officers, clerks, or even something fun like a study break. So you can use these tools to help your team stay connected professionally as well as personally. Here's a few examples of how our team is using on-the-fly instant messaging communications and groups to have some fun. The following were posted in our Silver Lining team channel. There's a lot of bad news out there, so these days we created this to have a little fun. My two favorite are the Zoom meeting on the bottom left, which shows audio only, and then the with video. And then the second one, where in the middle there, coronavirus has turned us all into dogs. We roam the house all day looking for food. We're told no when we get close to strangers, and we get really excited to take a car ride. The third pillar over there is not my favorite.
That's my favorite. Sure.
Everybody else's favorite too, PJ.
When they put this in the presentation, I was like, all right, we'll leave it.
Instead of the Kramer, it's
I don't know who put that in there, Bill.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. The third pillar of a good collaboration infrastructure is project management. Keeping projects moving forward while working remotely is hugely important, and it can be really challenging. So putting project management software in place helps you keep all your employees focused, on task, and sets clear expectations. This is especially important for complicated projects with multiple tasks and multiple parties involved. Managers and team members can also assign tasks, get notifications on where your team and stakeholders are working in real time, and communicate in the context with every task. Some features of project management software include timelines and dashboards for visual confirmation of project status, which is nice. Two popular project management services are Microsoft Planner and Monday. We actually used Microsoft Planner to put this webinar together. Let me show you an example of that. Here you can actually see Amy's planner and her current projects. This dashboard allowed her to actually sort her projects by importance and timing, etc. Planner also integrates with Microsoft Teams and Microsoft Office 365. Here you can actually see information associated with the specific webinar we created. So we use Project Planner to assign tasks with due dates and set priorities. We updated internal notes. We created lists. We marked items complete. We also attached files and other important links. Keeping all this information in one place was just great. The fourth and final pillar is remote collaboration. Remote collaboration is document management. Document management is all about establishing a central repository in the cloud for key documents such as templates, marketing collateral, maybe how-to documents, forms, really anything a company might need to run their business, you could store in a document management system. A solution like this allows everyone to have access to the latest version of a file. It allows for multiple people to work on the same document at the same time. And importantly, managers can also set control access and set permissions to files within the system. Other key features might include advanced search options, such as keywords, not just the file name. And you also have mobile access, which is really nice. The three most popular options are the Microsoft 365, the Google G Suite, and Dropbox. This is an example of our central repository, which is, in our case, it's SharePoint. SharePoint allows all users to access files and documents from any location at any time from any device. Some other important features are versioning and history review. We also use Office 365, a suite of integrated services and applications. Not only enables us to access the document management repository from any of these applications, it can also be used to tie all four pillars of communication and collaboration infrastructure together. So it brings the individual applications functionality and ties them together so data and knowledge flow through the applications seamlessly, providing and delivering a secure, manageable, and cohesive experience for end users.
Excellent. Thank you, Bill, Buddy, and Amy, for your guys' insight there. We had got one question that came in right now from Michael. Michael says, my understanding is that Zoom at its core is still insecure, not just in terms of Zoom bombing, of what Bill mentioned, but in much more serious ways, which allow deep access, especially to Macs. Why are you comfortable using it? Well, if I can answer it, it's just easiest for me, and I have Surface, so not a Mac. So there you go. That's my answer, but I'll leave it to the professionals there to answer that.
I could take that one, PJ. So there's a number of vulnerabilities that were uncovered in Zoom, and I think that really came with the explosive use of it and it being thrusted into the forefront of everyone's meetings and work days. So there was obviously the Zoom bombing where people were not securing their own meetings. There was certainly an issue, and that's more of a training issue. There was a remote code execution, which I think might be what Michael is referring to here, and that allowed a hacker to be able to run something. It had to do with the flaw of how the Zoom meeting was initiated on the client side that would allow an attacker to run an application in that. It was fairly complex, and it was actually identified in late 2019, before all this happened. But it has been patched since then. So using Zoom 5, that flaw should be patched. And there's another piece of the encryption algorithm that they were using, where they were using a slightly less sound encryption standard. But that is also being moved. I think by the end of May, all Zoom instances will be upgraded to AES, which is the advanced encryption standard, with a 256-bit key, which will make that key a lot harder to crack. Now, that was a flaw that you need a lot of processing power to do, so that would be something that a nation state might be able to pull off, or maybe some advanced hacking groups, but that's not something that we're going to find day to day, being able to decrypt that level of encryption. And again, that should be fixed by the end of May.
Actually, thank you.
according to Zoom's press release. Sorry.
There you go. Just received another question from Vinny. What are your opinions of working remotely with mobile access? Examples are mobile access to core applications for efficiencies like CRM input, etc. Any insight into that?
From a security perspective, I think it's great to be able to allow access from a lot of different devices. The thing that we want to make sure is, and the most important piece of allowing access from these devices is to understand that they're traveling with us all the time and that they could be lost or stolen. So we want to make sure that those devices have security policies applied to them. We want those devices to be encrypted at rest. That's like you need a PIN code or a face recognition or biometric recognition to unlock the device if it gets stolen and someone finds it. And then for the services that it's going to access, whether that be your Office 365 email or a CRM type application, the multi-factor authentication piece is extremely important. So that's where we want to have a code or SMS or some other method of authentication to make sure that someone else can't just steal your credentials and be able to log in to those services. Other than that, I think it's great to be able to enable the remote workforces.
So thank you. If there aren't any other questions, are there any words of parting advice that you three would like to provide to our members, our businesses, and the audience here today and when we send it out?
Well, PJ, I'll take that. First of all, we just want to thank you for facilitating this and for having us here. It was truly a pleasure. And then also everybody, thank you for taking the time to join us. Hopefully you're walking away from today with the idea that proactively setting up a high functioning remote work environment is not only important, but entirely feasible. And a few strategies that you may want to consider in doing so. Our focus as a team during these challenging times is really to be of service to the local and the broader business community. So if you do have any more in-depth questions about some of the things that we've covered today, or you want to have a discussion about one of these items that is more customized to your particular business situation, we are more than happy to do so. As you can see here, you can go to our website and our Contact Us page. We've also provided Bill's contact information, and he'll be sure to direct you to the right person within our organization. So just keep in mind that we're here to help, and we are more than happy to do so.
Excellent. Well, thank you again to Amy, Bill, and Buddy for taking time out. Very, very relevant, very informative information that I'm sure our businesses in the area will certainly utilize moving forward. So thank you. I thank you again for taking the time out. That concludes our webinar for this afternoon. Be sure to join the Chamber Chats, which we just rolled out last week. Tomorrow we are hosting Stu Leonard Jr., so we'll hear from Stu and his team as to how they're navigating COVID-19. And then on Monday, we are hosting Juanita James. Juanita is the president and CEO of the Fairfield County Community Foundation, so we'll hear from her as to how this has impacted our nonprofits in the area as well. So thank you again for everyone for joining us. We appreciate taking the time. I hope those the mothers out there have a great Mother's Day weekend. I hope everyone stays healthy and stays well. Thank you very much.